As you lay there, drifting into the unsettling comfort of sleep, what if everything you believed about yourself, the world, and the very nature of existence began to unravel? What if your mind, in its quietest moments, began to whisper the deepest secrets of the human condition? Welcome to a journey where the boundary between illusion and reality is dissolved, leaving you to confront the darkness within. Prepare for a descent that will strip away your sense of self, piece by piece, until you are left to question if anything can truly be known. The illusion of the self. You've always believed that you are the center of your own universe. That sense of individuality, of self, is a foundation for your entire experience of reality. It is the lens through which you filter the world. And yet, in the deepest corners of your mind, can you truly be sure that this self is anything more than an intricate illusion? Could it be that what you call you is merely an emergent property of the brain's chaotic processes, a trick of the mind that convinces you there is a solid, coherent self when in reality there is none? The philosopher David Hume, in his groundbreaking work, questioned the very nature of selfhood. He argued that when we try to examine the self, what it is that makes you you, we find nothing but a series of perceptions, fleeting thoughts, and emotional states. There is no constant, enduring entity beneath the surface. No central self that binds these experiences together. What you call self is nothing more than a construct, a story you tell yourself to maintain some semblance of coherence in an otherwise fragmented experience of life. And yet, this illusion of a unified self is not simply a philosophical notion. It is grounded in science. Studies of the brain, particularly those involving patients with damage to certain areas, show that our sense of self is not localized to any one place. In fact, neurological research has found that our experience of being is not contained in one region of the brain, but is the result of a complex interaction across many areas. The self, it seems, is not an object, but a process, a fleeting, shifting interaction between various neural circuits. What happens when you accept that the you think you know doesn't exist? What if you, the entity that believes it's reading this, is nothing more than a passing moment in an eternal stream of consciousness? If there is no self, then what are you really? And if you can't even grasp your own existence, what happens to the world you've built around it? As your mind sinks deeper into this unsettling realization, consider this. What if your mind has been lying to you all along? What if your entire identity is nothing but a fleeting shadow, an ephemeral projection of a brain desperate to make sense of its own chaos? If your self is nothing more than a trick of the mind, can you even trust the thoughts and feelings that emerge from it? Is it possible to live in a world where the self does not exist, or would it tear apart the very fabric of your reality? How much of your life is built upon this fragile illusion? And what would happen if it were to collapse entirely? The tyranny of free will. You've been told that you are free to choose your path, to make decisions that shape your destiny, to carve out a life based on your desires and ambitions. But what if this freedom you cling to is nothing more than an illusion? What if every thought, every impulse, every action you've ever taken was simply the result of a series of predetermined forces, invisible and beyond your control? The concept of free will has been a cornerstone of human thought for centuries, but it has long been under attack. Philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer believe that our actions are not as free as we imagine them to be. In his view, we are slaves to our desires, driven by unconscious forces we cannot comprehend. Schopenhauer argued that the will, the core of human desire, is blind, and that it compels us in ways we cannot escape, no matter how much we strive for autonomy. This notion that free will is an illusion is not confined to philosophy. In modern neuroscience, there's compelling evidence that the brain's decision-making processes are far more deterministic than we'd like to admit. Research conducted by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s found that the brain begins its preparation for action before we are consciously aware of it. In other words, your brain decides what you will do before you even realize you've made a decision. The illusion of free will, it seems, is merely your brain's way of creating a narrative that justifies the actions it has already predetermined. The implications of this discovery are staggering. If your brain is, in fact, orchestrating your decisions before your conscious mind catches up, then who are you really? Are you truly the author of your actions, or are you merely a passive observer, watching as your brain runs the show? What does it mean for your sense of control over your own life if every choice, no matter how small, is the result of unconscious neural processes? And it doesn't stop there. The field of behavioral psychology has shown that our decisions are heavily influenced by external factors, everything from societal expectations to subtle environmental cues. Our perception of free will is deeply influenced by context, even to the point where we cannot be fully aware of the hidden forces at play. Whether it's an advertisement designed to make you crave a particular product, or the unspoken pressure to conform to social norms, your choices are constantly shaped by invisible forces. So if free will is nothing more than an illusion, an elaborate trick of the mind, what does that say about the responsibility you feel for your actions? If every decision, from the mundane to the monumental, is shaped by forces beyond your control, can you really be held accountable for them? And if you can't even control the most basic elements of your life, where does that leave you? You may fight against this idea, trying to reclaim some semblance of control, but the deeper you go, the more this illusion crumbles. And so, you must ask, if free will is just an illusion, what remains of your agency in a world where your choices are predetermined, both by your own mind and the world around you? Can you live with the knowledge that your every decision is simply the result of forces you will never understand, or will this realization consume you entirely? The madness of time. Time, that invisible current that flows endlessly, shaping our lives and experiences, is something you've always relied upon. You wake up, you age, you grow, you die, all within the framework of time. Time, as it's told to you, is linear. It marches forward, a steady stream that can never be reversed, never paused. But what if the very nature of time, that simple and seemingly immutable force, is nothing but a cruel trick played upon your mind? The concept of time as a linear, constant force has been ingrained into your psyche for millennia. But in the world of physics, time is far more unstable, far more elusive than you realize. According to the theory of relativity, time isn't a universal constant at all. It warps and bends, affected by gravity and speed. Time, as you understand it, is a human construct, a way to make sense of a chaotic and infinitely complex universe. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity shatters the comfortable assumptions you have about time. He showed that time is relative, that it can slow down or speed up depending on the observer's frame of reference. If you were to travel at the speed of light, for instance, time would essentially stop for you, while the rest of the universe would continue to age, decay, and move forward. This simple truth, that time is not the constant you believe it to be, distorts everything you thought you knew about reality. If time can stretch, shrink, and bend, then how can you possibly trust your experience of it? But relativity is just the beginning of time's madness. In quantum mechanics, time is even more bewildering. The famous Schrodinger's cat paradox introduces a scenario where a cat inside a box can be both alive and dead at the same time, until it is observed. The outcome of the cat's fate depends entirely on the act of measurement. Time here is not simply a forward march, it's a web of probabilities, unfolding in multiple directions at once, each potential outcome dependent on the observer. What does this mean for your perception of time? If time doesn't flow in a straight line, if it can be warped, delayed, and manipulated, then where does your place in it truly lie? If the present is merely one possible outcome in an infinite series of possible pasts and futures, then how can you trust that the moment you live in is any more real than the countless others that could have unfolded? The implications are even more disturbing when you confront the possibility of time as an illusion. Time may not even exist as you experience it. Some physicists have argued that time is merely a construct of human perception, a necessary illusion that the brain creates to make sense of events. What if, when you look at a clock or feel the passage of a day, your mind is simply imposing a structure onto a reality where time is an abstraction, an idea, not a tangible force? And yet, in this uncertainty, you continue to live, measuring out your life in hours, days, years, all while time itself crumbles beneath the weight of its own paradoxes. But if time is not what you think it is, then what are you really living in? Can you ever truly experience the present if time is merely an illusion? And what does it mean for your sense of existence if everything you experience, including time itself, is just a fleeting perception, always on the edge of collapsing? What happens to your sense of self, to your place in the universe, if time is not the constant measurable force you've always believed, but something infinitely more complex, more disorienting, and ultimately more fragile? Can you still trust in the linearity of your life, or does this unraveling of time leave you stranded in an eternal present, never truly able to move forward? The tyranny of memory. You are defined by your memories. They are the foundation of who you are, the storehouse of your life's narrative. Each memory is a snapshot of who you were, an anchor to your identity, providing you with the illusion of continuity over time. You remember your first steps, your first love, the days that defined your life. But what if your memories, these seemingly reliable truths of your past, are nothing more than distorted fragments shaped by forces beyond your control? Memory, as you understand it, is a fragile thing. It feels like a perfect record, capturing every moment with pristine clarity. But neuroscience tells a different story. In fact, the more you try to recall something, the more your brain reshapes it. Memory is not a passive recording device. It is an active process, constantly reworking and distorting past events to fit into a narrative that aligns with your current self-perception. In other words, you are constantly rewriting your past, molding it into a version that suits your emotional needs, your biases, your desires. This phenomenon is known as memory reconsolidation. When you recall a memory, your brain doesn't simply pull up an unaltered version of it. Instead, it updates the memory based on your current emotional and psychological state. This means that every time you remember something, you are effectively changing the memory itself. The more you revisit an event, the more likely you are to alter it, adding details that weren't there or omitting those that were. Over time, the truth of what happened becomes increasingly obscured, replaced by a version of reality that is tailored to fit your present beliefs. Even more disturbing is the fact that memories can be entirely fabricated. This has been demonstrated in numerous psychological experiments where individuals were convinced they had experienced events that never occurred. The infamous Lost in the Mall experiment, for example, showed that participants could be led to remember being lost in a mall as children, even though the event had never happened. Your memories, it seems, are malleable, susceptible to suggestion, and not as reliable as you'd like to believe. And yet, you trust them. You trust your memories to tell you who you are, to guide your actions, to provide you with a sense of continuity. But what happens when you realize that these memories, your very sense of self, are unreliable, malleable, and even deceptive? What if the events you hold most dear, the ones that define you, are nothing more than fictions your mind has created to keep you anchored in a world that otherwise has no meaning? This is not just theoretical. The implications of memory's unreliability are far-reaching. For instance, eyewitness testimony, often considered one of the most reliable forms of evidence, is notoriously inaccurate. Studies have shown that people are prone to misremembering even the most basic details, and under certain conditions, they can be convinced of events that never took place. In a world where memory is so easily manipulated, can you trust anything at all about your past? If your memories are nothing more than a patchwork of half-truths and fabrications, then what does that say about your understanding of who you really are? And yet, you continue to live with this illusion, this false confidence in your ability to recall the truth of your life. But what if, in the deepest parts of your mind, you already know that your memories are lies? What if the more you try to remember, the further you stray from what truly happened, until you are left in a world where nothing can be trusted, not even the very events that you believe shaped you? Is there anything left to anchor you in a world where your mind distorts and reinterprets your past at will? How can you build a coherent sense of self when the foundation of your identity, your memories, is eroded by time, suggestion, and your own brain's deceitful tendencies? The deception of truth. You've been raised to believe that truth is a solid, undeniable force, that there are absolute truths in the universe, immutable facts that form the foundation of all knowledge. You've been taught that, no matter the circumstances, truth will always rise to the surface, and with it, a sense of clarity and understanding will follow. But what if the very concept of truth is a farce, a construct built upon the shifting sands of perception, bias, and power? Philosophers have long debated the nature of truth. Socrates, in his method of inquiry, sought to reveal the hidden truths of the world by challenging assumptions and exposing contradictions. Yet, in his pursuit of clarity, he was often faced with the unsettling realization that what we consider to be truth is constantly shifting, shaped by those who wield power over knowledge. In his time, truth was determined by those who controlled the narrative, and those narratives were subject to manipulation and distortion. But even more unsettling is the realization that truth, as you understand it, may not even exist in the way you think it does. Consider the concept of truth in the context of language itself. The words you use to describe the world are inherently limited. Language is an imperfect tool, incapable of capturing the fullness of reality. When you attempt to describe an object, a feeling, or an event, You are always translating it through a filter of symbols and concepts that cannot fully encapsulate the truth of the experience. In essence, language distorts reality, and the truth you think you understand is always, in some way, incomplete. This is particularly apparent when you examine the subjective nature of perception. The famous psychologist Ulrich Neisser once said that perception is a personal reality, shaped by an individual's previous experiences, biases, and cultural background. This means that two people witnessing the same event can experience it in vastly different ways, interpreting the same facts through the lens of their own unique perspective. If truth is determined by perception, and perception is shaped by everything you've ever known or believed, then is there any such thing as an objective truth at all? In fact, scientific discoveries themselves are often subject to this very distortion. The history of science is filled with truths that were once accepted as fact, only to be debunked and replaced with new, more accurate theories. The geocentric model of the universe, which placed Earth at the center of everything, was once accepted as an undeniable truth. For centuries, it was the truth that defined humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Yet when Copernicus and Galileo introduced the heliocentric model, that truth was shattered, revealing that what was once considered self-evident was merely a reflection of the limitations of human understanding. The unsettling reality is that even science, often regarded as the ultimate arbiter of truth, is constantly in flux. What is considered true today may be replaced by something entirely different tomorrow. This idea, known as scientific realism, acknowledges that our understanding of the universe is always evolving and that truth is always contingent upon the best available evidence at any given time. But if truth is ever changing, if it can be manipulated and distorted by perception, language, and power, then what does it really mean to know something? Can you ever truly know anything with certainty? Or is all knowledge merely a fleeting construct that exists only until it is replaced by something new? This leads to a chilling conclusion. If truth is a malleable concept, shaped by those who control its narrative, and if perception itself distorts reality, then everything you think you know is suspect. Your beliefs, your knowledge, your very understanding of the world, are they really truths or merely the product of the prevailing ideas of your time? And if truth is always in flux, always susceptible to manipulation and distortion, then how can you trust anything at all? In a world where truth is never fixed, where knowledge is always subject to change, can you live with the uncertainty of never truly knowing what is real? How can you trust your perceptions, your beliefs, or even your own thoughts when you realize that truth is a shadow, forever slipping through your fingers? The prison of consciousness. Consciousness, the very essence of your experience, is the thing that allows you to perceive the world, to think, to dream, to love. It is the light by which you navigate the darkness of existence. But what if consciousness itself is not a gift, but a curse? What if, trapped in your own mind, you are condemned to endlessly experience a world that you can never truly escape? You spend your entire life existing within the confines of your own consciousness, aware of the world around you, aware of yourself, aware of your fleeting moments in time. But what if this awareness, the thing that makes you human, is an inherent prison? What if being conscious means that you are constantly trapped within the limited scope of your own perceptions, never able to truly step outside yourself? The philosopher René Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." This statement, the foundation of much of modern philosophy, suggests that consciousness is what defines your existence. But what if, instead of providing clarity and understanding, consciousness actually locks you in an endless loop of self-reflection and doubt? Consider the works of existential thinkers like Soren Kierkegaard, who explored the existential angst that arises from the awareness of one's own consciousness. For Kierkegaard, the fact that humans are aware of their own existence, and more terrifyingly aware of their own inevitable death, creates a profound sense of anxiety. Your consciousness is both a source of self-awareness and, paradoxically, a source of isolation. You are forever cut off from the rest of existence, trapped within the walls of your mind. The awareness of your own mind creates a deep rift between you and the world. You are always alone in your thoughts, constantly navigating a landscape where meaning is elusive, where certainty is impossible. From a psychological standpoint, this sense of isolation within consciousness is amplified by the paradox of self-awareness. The very fact that you are aware of yourself, your desires, your fears, your limitations, creates a sense of disconnection from others. You can never truly know what it is like to experience the world as another person does. You are condemned to exist within your own subjective perspective, forever limited by your individual consciousness. Neuroscience reveals that the human brain is in many ways a prison for your awareness. The brain's neural circuits filter and interpret sensory data, constructing a reality that is tailored to your own perception. In other words, what you perceive as reality is not the world as it truly is, but a representation constructed by your brain. Your consciousness is a filter, distorting the world to fit your personal narrative. This means that the world you experience is never truly real in any objective sense. It is always a projection, shaped by the limitations and biases of your mind. But the most chilling aspect of consciousness is its ability to turn against you. The very thoughts that define you, the sense of self that you cling to, can become your tormentors. Consider the phenomenon of obsessive thinking, where your mind fixates on a thought, a memory, or a fear, unable to escape its grip. The more you try to suppress these thoughts, the more they intensify, pulling you deeper into a spiral of anxiety and despair. Your own consciousness becomes your prison, and the key to escape is nowhere to be found. You might try to distract yourself, to numb the mind through entertainment, substances, or distractions, but no matter what you do, you are always aware. Even in sleep, your consciousness continues to stir beneath the surface, rehashing memories, crafting dreams, reminding you that you are still trapped within your own mind. There is no escape, no sanctuary, only the relentless, inescapable presence of your own awareness. And so, you are forced to confront the most disturbing question of all. Is consciousness a gift that allows you to experience life, or is it a cruel prison that condemns you to an endless, inescapable loop of awareness? If your mind is both your greatest asset and your greatest enemy, can you ever truly be free? Or are you condemned to an eternal cycle of self-reflection and isolation? The madness of perception. You look at the world around you, at the colors, the shapes, the sounds that fill your senses. You assume that what you see, hear, and feel is an accurate representation of reality. But what if everything you experience, the entire world you interact with, has been twisted and warped by your own mind? What if reality, as you perceive it, is nothing more than an elaborate illusion, one that your brain has created to protect you from the terrifying chaos of the world? The idea that perception is not a faithful mirror of reality has long been explored by philosophers, but it is in the field of neuroscience where the true depth of this concept is revealed. Your brain, in its ceaseless effort to make sense of the world, constantly interprets and filters the information it receives. What you think of as reality is actually a highly subjective reconstruction, shaped by your brain's biases, your previous experiences, and even your emotional state. What you perceive as real is merely a simulation created by the mind, one that may bear little resemblance to the actual external world. Consider the famous blindsight phenomenon, where individuals who are blind due to brain damage can still see objects in their field of vision without being consciously aware of them. This suggests that perception is not simply about receiving sensory input, but about how the brain interprets that input. Your brain can create a perception of reality even in the absence of the sensory data it traditionally relies on. This further destabilizes the idea that your senses provide a clear, objective understanding of the world. What if everything you perceive, from the color of the sky to the texture of an object, is a product of the mind's interpretation and not the raw reality itself? This disorienting concept is amplified by the phenomenon of perceptual constancy. When you look at an object, your brain compensates for changes in light, perspective, and angle so that the object appears constant, even though it may be changing. Your brain is constantly manipulating the information it receives, creating a version of reality that fits with your existing mental model. In this way, your perception is always a reconstruction, one that is heavily filtered and distorted by the brain. The reality you think you see may not even resemble the true nature of the object or event. Even more disturbing are the countless illusions that can be created by your mind. Optical illusions, where your brain misinterprets visual stimuli, reveal just how unreliable perception can be. The famous molar-liar illusion, where two lines of the same length appear to be different sizes because of the direction of the arrows at their ends, is a simple demonstration of how easily your mind can be tricked into perceiving something that isn't there. But these are just the superficial illusions. The most disturbing ones are the ones you can't even detect, the hidden ways in which your brain alters your perception of reality without your knowledge. What about the phenomenon of cognitive biases? These are mental shortcuts your brain uses to make decisions quickly, but they often lead to errors in judgment. The confirmation bias, for example, makes you more likely to accept information that aligns with your pre-existing beliefs, while ignoring contradictory evidence. In this way, your perception of reality is constantly skewed by the biases of your mind. Every decision you make, every belief you hold, is colored by these hidden distortions. You may think you're seeing the world clearly, but in reality, your mind is constantly bending the truth to fit its narrative. And yet, the greatest illusion of all is the belief that you have control over your perception, that you can trust your senses to deliver you an accurate picture of the world. But the truth is far more unsettling. Your perception is not something you can fully trust. It is constantly shifting, altering itself to fit your mental models, your biases, and even the limitations of your senses. You may think you see the world as it truly is. But what if what you are seeing is only a fraction of the truth, filtered and distorted by the very mind that inhabits it? So, what if you can never truly know the world as it is? What if your mind, the very instrument you rely on to navigate life, is incapable of providing you with an accurate picture of reality? If your perception is inherently flawed, then how can you trust anything at all? And if you cannot trust your senses, your judgments, or even your mind, how can you ever truly know what is real? The fragility of knowledge. You pride yourself on the knowledge you've accumulated over your life, the facts, the truths, the wisdom that you've built your identity upon. You trust your understanding of the world, of science, of history. But what if knowledge itself is as fragile and fleeting as the world it attempts to explain? What if the very foundations of what you consider to be truth are built upon shaky ground, waiting to be eroded by the next revelation, the next paradigm shift? Throughout history, humanity has amassed knowledge, seeking to understand the universe and its complexities. Yet, despite centuries of scientific and philosophical inquiry, there is still so much that remains unknown, so much that eludes our grasp. In fact, what we call knowledge is often nothing more than a collection of assumptions, hypotheses, and theories that are only temporarily accepted as truth until new evidence surfaces to challenge them. The history of science is a history of certainty being replaced by uncertainty, of truths being overturned, and of new models emerging to replace the old ones. Take, for instance, the once immutable laws of classical physics. For centuries, Newton's laws of motion and gravity were seen as absolute, governing the behavior of all matter in the universe. But in the early 20th century, Einstein's theory of relativity shattered that certainty, revealing that the very fabric of space and time was not what we thought it was. The universe was not a machine running on predictable laws, but a dynamic and flexible system in which time, space, and gravity were all interwoven. Even more recently, quantum mechanics has revealed a reality even more bizarre and unpredictable, where particles can exist in multiple states at once, and the very act of observation can influence the outcome of an event. This constant shifting of the boundaries of knowledge should serve as a reminder of just how fragile our understanding of the world is. What we think we know today may be completely irrelevant tomorrow. What you hold as truth could be overturned by a single discovery, a new insight, or a shift in perspective. Every scientific theory, every historical narrative, every societal belief is built upon a mountain of assumptions, and that mountain is always vulnerable to collapse. The truths you cling to so tightly are nothing more than temporary consensus, susceptible to the whims of discovery, reinterpretation, and time. Even in the realm of history, the stories you've been told about the past are not as reliable as you might think. The victors, those who hold power, are the ones who write history. The truth of what actually occurred is often lost to time, rewritten by those who have the ability to shape the narrative. Ancient civilizations, once thought to have disappeared into obscurity, have been revealed to have had vastly different realities than what was previously imagined. The story of humanity, like the story of science, is one of constant reinterpretation. What you know about your own history may very well be distorted or incomplete, and the deeper you dig, the more you realize that even the most cherished historical truths are precariously built upon fragmented evidence. In psychology, the fragility of knowledge becomes even more evident. The mind, with its vast network of cognitive processes, is highly prone to error. Memory, as you've already learned, is malleable and unreliable. Your understanding of your own emotions, motivations, and behaviors is shaped by an imperfect system that constantly distorts reality. In fact, psychological studies have shown that even your own identity, the very sense of self you rely on to navigate the world, is a constantly shifting construction. The knowledge you think you have about yourself is, in many ways, just as fragile as the knowledge you have about the world around you. So, what does it mean for you to hold on to knowledge when you realize that it is not as stable as you believe? If what you know about the universe, about science, about history, about yourself, is built upon a foundation of fragility and uncertainty, then what does that say about the trust you place in your understanding of reality? Is there any knowledge that can ever truly be considered permanent, or are we forever at the mercy of a shifting and unstable foundation? And as you grapple with this unsettling truth, you must ask, how can you navigate the world, make decisions, or even live your life when everything you think you know may crumble at any moment? If knowledge itself is so fragile, what can you truly rely on in a universe that refuses to be understood? The weight of choice. You've always believed that your choices define you. The decisions you make, the paths you take, the people you choose to love, the career you build, the beliefs you hold. These choices shape the very essence of your existence. They give you a sense of control, a feeling that you are the architect of your own life. But what if every choice you make is not the result of free will, but of an endless chain of influences that you cannot possibly understand or control? Psychologically, you are shaped by countless forces that precede your decisions. From your upbringing to your cultural background, from societal pressures to subconscious biases, your choices are heavily influenced by factors outside of your awareness. In fact, the idea that you are the sole author of your decisions is an illusion. Research in behavioral psychology shows that much of what you do is driven by automatic mental processes, influenced by stimuli that you are not even conscious of. The famous nudge theory, developed by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, suggests that even the most seemingly innocuous choices you make are often subtly guided by external forces. You may believe you are choosing freely, but in reality, your decisions are being nudged, shaped, and manipulated by a complex web of unseen influences. And then there is the concept of decision fatigue, the psychological phenomenon in which the quality of your decisions deteriorates after a prolonged period of making choices. Your brain, overwhelmed by the sheer number of decisions it must make, begins to default to patterns of behavior, relying on mental shortcuts rather than conscious thought. As a result, the idea of free will in decision-making becomes increasingly questionable. How much of your choice is actually the product of exhaustion, of ingrained habits, or of biases that you are completely unaware of? In the realm of philosophy, the weight of choice has long been a subject of torment. Existential philosophers, particularly Jean-Paul Sartre, have argued that with freedom comes the burden of responsibility. Sartre's concept of bad faith describes the way individuals deceive themselves into believing that their choices are dictated by external circumstances, when in fact they are free to choose otherwise. According to Sartre, the very act of choosing forces you to confront the meaninglessness of existence. You are faced with an overwhelming responsibility to create meaning in a world that offers none. Every decision you make is an assertion of your existence, a declaration that you are here and that your life matters. But what if, in reality, your choices don't matter at all? The paradox of choice is that the more options you have, the less satisfied you become. In a world filled with endless possibilities, every choice you make forces you to confront the ones you didn't make. Every opportunity you pass up, every path you choose not to take, leads to a lingering sense of regret, a haunting question of what if. It is as though the weight of infinite choices is crushing you, leaving you with the realization that you can never truly know whether the path you've chosen is the right one. This unsettling realization is compounded by the concept of counterfactual thinking, where you imagine how your life might have turned out differently if you had made other choices. These what-if scenarios plague your mind, feeding into a never-ending cycle of doubt and regret. You are perpetually haunted by the paths you didn't take, by the decisions you didn't make, and the life you could have had. Each choice you make is a gamble, a leap into the unknown, and the uncertainty of it all eats away at you, leaving you to question whether you are truly free or if your life has